Maya Brooks de Nam Chat Ko Te Ethan Cole Vakio on Louis Lai Dung Luke Din Chum Tren Tran Buatik, Ben Con Dang, Quay Cham, Trong Thursday, on Sang Veng No Nu Mat. Dung Buk Them Mot Buk Now, Ko Noi Rat Ki, and Hung Jong Lai Sak Nu Loi Dao. Keen Ethan Kung Han Lai Jua Nun Nak Jazz Vatien Koi Kwa and Hung Nuoi Kok Mak Ves Sang Trong. On Quay Sang Nin Ko, Doi Mat Hien Ro Su Ko Hu Han La So Hai. Ode La Fong Teek Tren Tang Chow Not Kwa Mot Kok Sen Xa Hoa. Noi Moi Thursday Du Bong Bei Din Muc Ko The Che Jiao Bat Siu Jugi. Mot Hop Dong. Mot Loi Noi Doi. Tam Chi Ca Mot Mu. Ethan Von de Quinn Voi Vik by Nuoi Kok Doi Theo. In Hung Chua Bao Gio on Thay Maya, Song Tang Den Vei. Ko Kong Dua. Ko Dang Ko Kuan. Ko Chien Jiaitha. Ethan Hoi. Ko Ju Jong Ben Tin Du Tim De Dap and Han Han. Maya Kong Tra Loi Nai. On Mat Ko Dao Rat and Han Quan Hung Bon Teek. Kwa Ban Song Kin Nin Suong Tan Fo Dang Sang Ruk Ben Dui. Roy Dung Lai Omot Gok Toi Gon Kwa So Lon. Chi Trong Mot Koen Kok. Ethan Thay Kuan Mat Ko Doi Sak. Ko Mot Te Ban Tia O Day. Ko Noi. Va Nuon Kon Dung O Cho Du Lao Han. Hoesi Kong Bo Lo on Lon Thursday High. Ka Noi I Nu Bop and Get Kong Kai Sung Quan Ethan. On Sut Bat Koi Vigi Ko Dang Noi Kwa Len. In Hung Doi Mat Maya Kong He Run. Kong Mot Chut Now. Ko Seat Chat Taeon Han. Kio on the Koi Koang Trong Jua Kan Fong. Noi Muan Sang, Du Fan Shiu Kwa Aro Trin Bo Suit Din, on Dang Mak. Ai, on Hoi. Tai Sa Ko Lai Chik Nu Vei. Maya Engian Naham. Nu the Ko Dang Kan Tung Jie Kon Lai. Vi Ko Nuoid about Truok Lich Trin Kwa On. Ko Nujoi Beat on Se Dung O Day. Va Nugoi Du Kong Phi La Muon Jup On. Ethanim Lang. Trong Mot Vi Ga Non Angui. On Chi Ne Thay Tieng Ly Cham Now. Tieng Jiri Kwa and Hung Nuoi Fuk Vi Ulut Tren Sonda. Cam Thatch. Va Tieng Mao Dap. Trong Tai Min. Mo Cam Jiak Lan Bodak Song Long On. Kong Phi V and Hung Gi Maya Vua Noi. Ma Vi Catch Ko Noi Ra. Judu Jong Nu Koda Nin Thay Say Mot. Chui. Su Vik Tu Truok. Nu Ko Noi That. Tide Kong Kon La Mot Bui Gap Mat. Kung Kong Kon La Mot Toi Jiao Dike Ben Thuong Nua. De La Motit Sai Bei. Va Ai Du Rat Gon On De Tu Te Mo Kwa Cho No. Maya Kio on Sat Veo Buk Tuong Kan Han Lang. Noi on Din by Chan Batva and Hung Tieng Noi Tu Fong Teek Chi. Kon La Mot Lop. Mton Mo Ho Phia Sao. Ne Twa. Ko Noi. Lon Nai Gon Nu Ti Tam. Dung Tin Tai Xi Kwa On. Ong Tata Kong Dua on Den De Cheetah Don on V. Ethan Lap Tuc Quay Dao Nin Ve Phia Kwa. Noi Nuoi Tai Xi, Vin Dung Nguai Han Lang Nu Mot Sai Bong Ben, then Den Dang Ngio. Moi Thursday Trong Dao on Bat Dao Gep Lai Theo Mot Catch Dang So. Kong Kai Sang Trong Nai, Suim Lang Bat Thuong. Vik Maya Dun God Zut Hien, Bakam Jiak Nu Ko Ai, Du Dang Kwa Chat Tung Loi Tho Quan On. On Hua Rang Ga Foot Vo Roy Kong Chi La Mot Loi Kan Bao. No La Duong Ran Dao Tien Jua Song Va Chet. For a second, Ethan Cole did not move. He stood with his back against the wall, the music from the ballroom still drifting through the air like a lie no one had noticed yet, and stared at Maya Brooks as if she had just spoken in another language. The words were simple enough, but the meaning behind them landed like a fist. Don't trust the driver. It was the kind of sentence that changed the shape of an entire night. Ethan's pulse thudded hard in his neck as he glanced toward the hallway entrance, where his driver waited with the same calm posture he had worn since arriving. A man who looked invisible by design. A man who never spoke unless spoken to. A man Ethan had trusted for 3 years without question. Maya saw the doubt in his face and pressed closer, her voice low and urgent. "I'm not guessing," she said. "I saw the signal. Someone outside knew exactly where you would be standing, exactly when you would stop, exactly how long you'd stay there." She did not sound dramatic. She sounded terrified for him. Ethan swallowed and looked back toward the ballroom windows. The city lights glittered beyond the glass, beautiful and far away, but all he could think about now was how easy it would be for someone to turn a room like this into a shooting gallery. Every polished surface, every open angle, every reflection carried danger. Suddenly, the entire event felt staged, like he had walked onto a set built for his own ending. Why would my driver do this? Ethan asked, and there was anger in the question now, but also something darker. The first crack of betrayal. Maya's expression tightened. Because someone paid him, she said. Or promised him something worse if he refused. Ethan let out a short breath through his nose and pushed himself off the wall, but Maya caught his sleeve instantly. Not yet, she warned. If you move too fast, you'll expose yourself. We need to know who else is involved. He hated how right she was. He hated that every instinct in him wanted to storm out into the hallway and demand answers from the first man he saw. But he had survived long enough in his world to know that the first answer was usually the wrong one. A waiter passed by with a silver tray of champagne, smiling too politely, and Ethan noticed the way the man's eyes flicked once toward the corner window before returning forward. Small. Almost nothing. But Maya noticed it too. Her fingers tightened around Ethan's wrist. That, she whispered, is what I meant. Ethan followed her gaze and saw another figure near the far end of the ballroom, half hidden behind a decorative pillar, speaking softly into an earpiece. Not a guest. Not staff. Watching. Waiting. The pieces were starting to arrange themselves around him like a trap slowly closing. For the first time that night, Ethan understood that the danger was not outside the building. It was inside the room with him, wearing expensive clothes, polished shoes, and a smile that could pass for respect. And somewhere between the entrance, the driver, and the shadow at the window, someone had already decided he was supposed to die before midnight. Maya looked at him again, and in her eyes he saw the only thing more frightening than fear itself, certainty. If your driver set you up, she said, then we've got maybe a few minutes before they realize I warned you. Ethan's jaw tightened. The ballroom suddenly felt smaller, hotter, and far more deadly than it had a moment ago. He wasn't just being watched now. He was being hunted. The moment Ethan Cole understood he was being hunted, his body changed before his mind fully caught up. His shoulders tightened, his breathing grew shallow, and every sound in the ballroom sharpened into something dangerous. The soft clink of glass, the low murmur of voices, the distant laugh of a woman near the bar, none of it felt normal anymore. Everything had the eerie stillness of a place pretending to be safe. Maya Brooks noticed the shift immediately. She stepped in front of him just enough to block his line of sight to the crowd, her expression focused and unreadable. Don't stare at anyone too long, she said. If they know you suspect them, they'll move early. Ethan gave a short nod, though his eyes kept drifting toward the hallway and the entrance beyond it. His driver was still there, standing in the same position as before, too calm to be innocent. Ethan had trusted that man with airports, private meetings, late-night pickups, and transfers no one else knew about. He had never once had a reason to doubt him. That made the betrayal sting harder. He could feel anger rising under his skin, hot and restless, but Maya's warning kept him in place. If this was a setup, then rushing out would only make it easier for whoever planned it to finish the job. He hated that she was right, but he also knew it. Who are you? Ethan asked under his breath, keeping his face angled toward the room as if he were just another guest waiting for the evening to drag on. Maya didn't answer at first. Her gaze was fixed on the far side of the ballroom, where a man in a charcoal suit stood with one hand in his pocket and the other near his cuff, pretending to admire the decor. He looked ordinary enough that anyone else would have missed him, but Maya had already seen enough. Not part of the guest list, she murmured. And he's been watching the exits for the last 4 minutes. Ethan followed her line of sight and saw the man slightly shift his weight, the smallest movement possible, as if he had just received a message. Maya leaned closer. There are at least 2 people inside this room who know exactly where you are, she said. Maybe more. One of them fed information to your driver. The other is waiting for the signal. Ethan felt a cold line run through him. The idea that this wasn't one random threat, but a coordinated trap, made the situation far more serious. Signal for what? He asked. Maya's jaw tightened. For when to act. That was all she said, but it was enough. A server moved past them with a tray of drinks, and Maya touched Ethan's arm lightly, guiding him half a step deeper into the shadow of the wall. It looked casual to anyone watching. It was anything but. Ethan noticed the server's earpiece, the way his eyes flicked toward the man in the charcoal suit, and then the split-second hesitation before he walked on. Another piece. Another warning. The trap was closing from more than one direction now, and Ethan could feel it in the air. The way the room itself seemed to tighten around him, the way conversations seemed too carefully timed, the way every person nearby suddenly looked like a suspect. He looked at Maya, and for the first time he saw not just fear in her face, but urgency sharpened by calculation. She had not dragged him back by instinct alone. She had seen something he had missed. And now Ethan understood that if he wanted to survive the night, he would have to stop thinking like the man who owned the room and start thinking like the man trapped inside it. The first thing Ethan Cole felt was not fear, but humiliation. It came sharp and cold, cutting through the anger he had been holding back since Maya Brooks pulled him away from the center of the ballroom. He had spent years believing that control was the same as safety. Tonight was proving otherwise. With every passing second, the room around him peeled away another layer of that illusion. The people smiling under crystal lights were not guests in a celebration. They were pieces in a game he had not been told he was playing. Ethan kept his face steady, but inside his thoughts were racing. If the driver had set him up, then the betrayal went deeper than a single man. That kind of precision did not happen by accident. Somebody had studied his routine, his habits, the exact angles of this room, and the exact moment he would be exposed. The worst part was not the threat itself. It was the realization that someone had been close enough to learn everything about him without raising suspicion. He glanced once more toward the entrance, but the driver was gone now, leaving behind only a colder feeling than before. The empty spot where he had stood was somehow more alarming than if he had still been there. Maya noticed Ethan looking for answers and spoke before he could ask. "He's moved," she said quietly, "which means they know you're aware." Ethan turned toward her sharply. "Then why are we still here?" he asked. It was the question that had been building in him since the first warning. Maya's eyes narrowed, not in impatience, but in focus. "Because I need one more detail," she said. "The man in the charcoal suit. He's not the only one watching the exits." Ethan followed her gaze again, and this time he saw what she meant. Near the far side of the ballroom, where the corridor leading to the private rooms curved out of sight, a woman in a red dress stood with her back to the crowd, holding her phone low and speaking in a voice too soft to hear. Her posture was calm, too calm. She was not waiting for the evening to end. She was waiting for a signal. A slow, sick understanding settled over Ethan. This was not a random danger or a single traitor making a desperate move. It was organized. Someone had placed eyes throughout the building, each one assigned to watch a different angle, a different door, a different path of escape. His driver had likely delivered him here, knowing exactly what would happen next. The staff had been compromised or ignored. The guests were either innocent noise or deliberate cover. In that moment, Ethan felt something break inside him. Not his confidence, but his trust. He had built his life on the assumption that he could see threats before they reached him. Yet here he was, in the middle of a room full of polished smiles, and the real threat had already been standing beside him. Maya read the change in his face and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She did not need to say more. Ethan understood now that the danger was no longer theoretical. The trap was active, the players were in motion, and the people closest to him were not who they claimed to be. The room had become a map of hidden loyalties, and every second he stayed in it made the outline of the betrayal clearer. He was no longer trying to decide whether this was real. He was trying to decide who, in a room full of liars, would be the first to strike. The silence after Ethan Cole realized the room was full of liars lasted only a second, but it felt longer than the rest of the night combined. Maya Brooks caught the shift in his expression and, without looking directly at him, moved a fraction closer so her shoulder nearly touched his. It was a small gesture, almost nothing to anyone else, but to Ethan it meant one thing. She was ready to move when he was. The ballroom still glittered with warm light and elegant faces, yet now every reflection seemed suspicious. Every pause in conversation a warning, every smile a mask stretched too thin. Ethan could feel the pressure of the situation tightening around him like a hand closing slowly at the throat. He glanced toward the exit and saw that the driver was gone for good. The absence made the betrayal real in a way that words could not. For years, that man had been a fixed point in Ethan's life, someone he could summon without thinking, someone who had known his habits better than most of his friends. Now that loyalty had vanished into the hallway, and Ethan had no idea whether the driver had simply escaped or had gone ahead to report his position. Either possibility was bad. Maya followed his glance and spoke softly. "He's warning them," she said. "Or he already did." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we leave now," he replied, low and firm. But Maya shook her head once. "Not through the main corridor." She guided him a step deeper into the shadow beside the wall, where the edge of a marble column cut them off from the brightest line of sight. From there, Ethan could see more of the room without being obvious. He spotted the man in the charcoal suit again, still near the far side, now standing with another guest whose hand kept drifting toward his jacket pocket. He spotted the woman in red near the corridor, still on her phone. He spotted a waiter who had passed them twice without ever changing direction. Each detail sharpened the same truth. The room was not only watched, it was coordinated. People weren't wandering. They were waiting. Maya leaned in close enough that Ethan could hear her over the music. "There's a service hall behind the decorative wall," she said. "If we move at the right time, we can get out without crossing the ballroom." Ethan looked at her in surprise. She knew the layout. She had clearly studied the place before stepping in. That changed everything. She had not simply stumbled into this chaos. She had come prepared. "You've been here before," Ethan said. Maya's eyes stayed on the room, long enough to know where the cameras don't reach. That answer was more unsettling than reassuring. Ethan felt a new layer of tension settle over him. Maya's caution was not fear, it was strategy. She had come into the room with a plan, and that meant she had suspected something even before the warning. Perhaps she had not known the exact shape of the danger, but she had known enough to stay ready. That made her more valuable to him, and in a night like this, value was everything. The ballroom no longer felt like a place of luxury. It felt like a chessboard, and Ethan had just learned he was not one of the players. He was the target. He looked at Maya, then at the hidden corridor she had indicated, and understood that their first real move was about to begin. The first person Ethan Cole wanted to confront was his driver, but the man was already gone, and that absence made the truth colder than any argument could have. So instead, Ethan focused on the next nearest threat, the room itself. Maya. Brooks had called it a chessboard, and now that he was looking at it the right way, he could see the pieces moving. The man in the charcoal suit near the far side of the ballroom was no longer pretending to admire the decor. He was facing the corridor with his body angled just enough to block a clear line of sight. The woman in the red dress had shifted from the hallway wall to a position closer to the exit, her phone lowered now, but her attention sharper. And the waiter who had passed them twice was no longer serving drinks. He had stopped near the decorative arch, where he could watch both the ballroom entrance and the service door at the same time. Maya noticed Ethan reading the room and gave a slight nod, as if confirming he had finally seen what she had already mapped out. "That one," she murmured, barely moving her lips, "is the organizer, not the one who pulled the trigger. The one who makes sure everyone else is where they need to be." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" he asked. Maya hesitated just long enough to make the answer matter. "I know of him," she said. "That's worse." Ethan had spent enough time around dangerous people to understand what that meant. A known enemy could be anticipated. An unseen coordinator meant structure, money, and patience. It meant the people in this room were not improvising. They had come with instructions. He looked toward the charcoal-suited man again and saw, for the first time, the tiny movement of a hand at the wrist, a subtle touch to an earpiece hidden beneath his cuff. No one else in the room would have noticed. No one else needed to. Ethan did notice, and once he did, the whole pattern clicked into place. The man wasn't waiting for luck. He was waiting for confirmation. A signal. A green light from somewhere outside or above or behind the walls. This was not a single betrayal. It was a coordinated operation with a center point, and somewhere in the building was the person giving the final order. "Who's behind him?" Ethan asked quietly. Maya's expression hardened. "That's what we need to find out before they decide you've stayed long enough." She shifted her weight and glanced toward the side corridor she had mentioned earlier. The way she moved made it clear that she had already chosen the escape route, but not yet the moment. Ethan followed her gaze and saw a narrow service passage partly hidden by a set of tall mirrored panels and a gold frame. It looked ordinary. That was exactly why it mattered. A good trap always left one visible door and one invisible one. For a brief second, Ethan considered stepping away from Maya and forcing answers out of the room by sheer presence alone. That was his instinct, the habit he had relied on for years. But the people around him were too disciplined, too synchronized, too close to the edge of action. Any sudden move would tip the balance. So he stayed still, studying the people who had been circling him without ever touching him. He now understood the shape of the betrayal. The driver had brought him here, the watchers had taken positions, and the organizer was waiting for the exact second to close the net. Somewhere beyond the mirrored panels was their escape. Somewhere in the ballroom was the hand that would decide whether they reached it alive. The room changed the instant Ethan Cole and Maya Brooks moved. It was not a dramatic change, not something loud enough for the guests to notice, but Ethan felt it immediately in the way the air seemed to tighten around him. 1 second he was standing still, reading the positions of the people around him, and the next Maya's hand was already on his sleeve, guiding him toward the narrow service corridor she had pointed out moments earlier. She did not pull him hard. She did not need to. The urgency in her expression was enough. "Now," she said under her breath. Ethan followed her, taking 2 quick steps that looked casual from the ballroom and entirely different from the inside. The mirrored panels beside them caught fragments of light and broken reflections of guests, turning the hallway into a shifting wall of faces. For a moment he saw himself split into pieces, suit jacket, tense jaw, unreadable eyes, and he hated how exposed that made him feel. Behind them, the music continued at the same steady pace, too elegant to match the danger building just a few feet away. That disconnect was almost worse than the threat itself. The world outside the room would never know how close things were to collapsing. Maya pushed open the service door just enough to slip through and immediately paused, listening. Ethan stepped in behind her, and the noise of the ballroom dropped to a distant hum. The corridor was narrow, lined with plain gray walls, utility doors, and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with stale air. It should have felt safer. Instead, it felt like the quiet before a strike. Maya looked left, then right, then back at Ethan. "They'll notice us missing fast," she said, "if they haven't already." Ethan glanced down the corridor and spotted a security camera tucked into the ceiling corner. Maya saw it too and kept moving without hesitation. "This way," she said, leading him past a stack of folded linens and a closed supply room. Her pace was controlled, but Ethan could tell she was thinking several steps ahead. That only deepened his suspicion that she knew more than she had said. "You've done this before," he said, not as a question, but a statement. Maya did not deny it. "I've survived worse places than this," she replied. "Try to keep up." That answer landed harder than Ethan expected. She was not the kind of person who wasted words, and every sentence she gave him revealed just enough to be useful without giving away the whole story. He could hear the difference between panic and discipline now. Maya wasn't panicking. She was adapting. That made her dangerous in the right way. Ethan respected that immediately. At the end of the corridor, a door stood half lit by a red emergency sign, and beyond it lay the service hall she had described. Ethan could already imagine a route through the kitchen, the back stairwell, and eventually outside. But before they could reach it, Maya suddenly froze and raised one hand. Ethan stopped at once. At the far end of the corridor, a shape moved briefly across the light from the ballroom door. Not enough to identify. Enough to confirm they were not alone. Maya's voice became almost a whisper. "They're already checking the exits." Ethan felt the trap tighten again, this time around there. Escape. The chase had begun, and whoever had arranged the night was no longer waiting patiently in the ballroom. They were moving now. The shape at the far end of the corridor vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but Ethan Cole knew that did not mean the danger was gone. It only meant someone had seen them move. Maya Brooks remained perfectly still for half a second, listening to the building the way other people listen to music. Her face held no panic, only focus sharpened by pressure. "They know," she said quietly. "Now we move like they expect us to panic." Ethan nodded once, though every instinct in him wanted to turn back and confront the ballroom head-on. Instead, he followed her into the service hall, where the air was warmer, the walls were brighter, and the noise of the party behind them became a dull, distant pulse. The service hall was lined with stainless counters, stacked trays, and the practical clutter of a place designed for movement rather than presentation. It should have felt like an escape. Instead, it felt like another stage inside the same trap. Maya led him past a half-closed swing door, then paused beside a row of carts stacked with folded tablecloths. Ethan noticed her eyes moving constantly now, checking reflections in the metal, tracking shadows in the corners, reading the hall as if it were an enemy map. "There," she said, pointing with a slight tilt of her chin toward a narrow side passage. "That route leads to the loading corridor. If we reach it before they seal the back exit, we're out." Ethan looked where she indicated and saw two staff members at the far end of the hall, both standing too straight, both pretending to be busy with a cart that had not moved in minutes. They were not cooks, not cleaners, not tonight. One of them glanced up and immediately looked away, confirming what Ethan already felt in his bones. The organizer had found their trail. The net was no longer waiting to close. It was already tightening from both sides. "They're watching the passage," he muttered. Maya's jaw hardened. "Then we don't give them time to settle." Before Ethan could answer, Maya stepped out first, moving with deliberate calm instead of speed. That alone was enough to throw off the nearest watcher, who had clearly expected fear, hesitation, or a run. Instead, she walked like someone who belonged there, one hand lightly touching the wall, as if she were simply looking for the right door. Ethan followed one pace behind, keeping his face unreadable, but every muscle in him was ready. The first staff member near the cart shifted his weight, and Ethan saw it instantly. The subtle movement of someone preparing to intercept. Not yet attacking, waiting for the signal. Then Maya did something he did not expect. She reached over, grabbed a metal tray from a nearby cart, and let it clatter loudly to the floor. The sound shattered the corridor's stillness. Heads turned. The two watchers reacted at once. One stepped forward too quickly. The other lifted a hand toward his earpiece. It was the split second Maya wanted. She caught Ethan's wrist and pulled him toward the side passage while the nearest man was still deciding whether to stop them or call for help. Ethan moved without thinking. The passage narrowed quickly, then opened toward a dim loading area where a door stood half open, spilling pale light onto the concrete floor. Behind them, voices rose in confusion. Someone was shouting now, no longer pretending to be a guest or staff. The room had finally revealed its true face. Ethan's heart hammered hard, but beneath the danger there was a new feeling taking shape, certainty. They had found the breach in the trap. They were no longer trapped in the ballroom. They were inside the pursuit.